Oh man, here we go. I bet y'all have never seen this room before. I needed to find a place to do physical book reviews where I could put the book in the frame so you could look at it and I could have that shiny thumbnail. Um, because every time I watch a book review, the person has the book in their hand like the whole time, and I'm like, that's a long time to hold a book. And if you've watched my channel and you know how long-winded I can be, we might be sitting here for 15 minutes with me holding this book like an idiot. So that's this. Welcome to my little dining room. Okay, the Disappearance, actually, not the Disappearance at Devil's Rock by Paul Tremblay. Or Tremblay, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. I listened to the audiobook of this, not exclusively, but I just listened to some of it. By the way, it's a great audiobook if you're into that. It's very good. The voice actress is really good. She said his name, and I still couldn't figure it out. Yeah, whatever. It's one of those reviews today. So let's give y'all a quick little non-spoiler review if you're here for that and you don't, you haven't read this yet, and then we'll talk some spoilers. So the non-spoiler review. I gave this book. I think I gave it a 4 out of 5. I would probably give it a 4 or a 4.5. I really like this. So quick back up for a second. I haven't read any of this cat's books, and I saw some people talking about him. And as a horror author, that's what I generally like to read, and I'm trying to discover new horror authors as well. And always, if you want to put any recommendations down in the comments, I would love that. But very mixed. And the biggest, I tried not to spoil too much, but of course I wanted to see if it was worth my time. The biggest thing I see is the ambiguity. That's like the name of the game with Paul Tremblay, it seems, is ambiguity. And I like ambiguity. I personally do. It can be done very poorly, of course, but I wanted to read his book. So I know that probably his most popular book is A Head Full of Ghosts, but for some reason the title of this one, I don't know. I thought, what the hell? I'll read that. So, anyways, I read it. I think it's excellent. And people are also saying this isn't even his best book. So this book is very ambiguous. So I can see where people are going with that. But I like it. It's very cryptic at times, and it makes you think. And it's written in a kind of quasi literary and genre writing blend, which I love. I would like to see more authors doing stuff like that. But if you're somebody that just prefers genre writing through and through, like you just read for the story and you need a thrilling story that is wrapped up with a bow and is very easy to follow and everything, then I don't think you'll like this, because it's not really about the story. The story is very interesting. I did find it very engaging and intriguing, but it's more about the characters and what they're going through, and it's more of like a character study. I'm taking my slippers off, by the way, from what the hell I'm doing. Let me give you a quick synopsis of this if you have no clue and you'd like to read this. It's basically about a mom who receives a call from one of her son's friends that he's not home. Hey, is Tommy here? He's not with us. And she says, no, I was waiting for him to come home. And, now we have a missing child case on our hands. And then you just kind of see how a family deals with that, basically. So it's almost like this is a trauma book disguised as a crime missing person thriller, and it's very much bigger than that. And the way that family trauma and grief and these kinds of very hard situations are dealt with is very interesting and done very well. And I won't spoil anything, but there are some interesting ways that this author goes about it that kind of just says fuck you to genres, really. And I always appreciate that. It blends all sorts of things, and he's not afraid to do that. And I thought almost everything worked perfectly. I thought the way that he blended these little bits of things worked out, and it was so interesting. It had great characters. The things that he was trying to say I found very interesting about the way he tried to say them, and it just had a lot of crypticness in it. Like uh, it reminded me of like Twin Peaks at times, like with this bizarre, very uncomfortable feeling mystery that's like, what is going on? And you're just, it's very eerie. So great tone, great characters, great writing. How do you come up with this stuff? Now, I've always said this. The writing is a little more important to me than the story, so that's why I like this. But I think I've made my peace on that. I think that, if you don't like that kind of stuff, you're probably not going to like this. But yeah, I think it's great. It does have a few issues that I just simply can't tell you about without spoiling the book. There are a couple minor plot point kind of things that happen that I found were a bit strange. I just simply can't tell you without spoiling the book, so I'm sorry. But that's that. I absolutely recommend it. I do not think this kind of stuff is for everybody. And I think this author very clearly is not for everybody, but just based on this one book, I am definitely probably in the camp that likes him because I thought this was excellent. Let's get into spoilers. So, I don't want to actually even talk about the plot too much. I generally don't because it's like we all read the book, we know what it's about, but I wanted to talk about a few things. I wanted to talk about what I didn't like about this book. And there's only three things that I was kind of weird about. And that's why I gave it a 4 instead of a 5. I mean, 5 is like a masterpiece, right? A 4 is still an incredibly good book. I still thought this book was incredibly good. But okay, so this book, there's a lot of stuff in this book, and you know this if you're in the spoiler section, dealing with children. You get to see these kids, you're going to get flashbacks to, what's going on. That sort of fills in the blanks of what the mother and her daughter and the grandmother and people don't know. In some ways, it only raises more questions, which I always found fun. For every question that gets answered in this book, you have two more questions that arise. And I dig that kind of stuff. Now, when you're writing a book that's very ambiguous, where you're not really ever sure what's going on, there's ways to fuck that up very easily. I mean, you can just throw anything, like you can just throw red herring bullshit in the book just to fuck with people and then say, woo, it's ambiguous. That's shitty writing, right? And that's not like this in here. Everything in here has a purpose. I loved kind of trying to uncover what was going on, and I just like that stuff. Everything had a purpose. I'm just not sure what the purpose is, if that makes sense. So how would I know it has a purpose? I don't know. I just feel it, That's something I just really liked about this book. So when I started reading this, first off, I kind of semi-spoiled myself just because of the fact that I had heard that he maybe does ambiguous endings or books sometimes. So I did go into that thinking maybe. I could tell by like the first couple chapters that it was going to be this route. And I kind of thought, I think this is going to be a book where we never find out what happens to this kid. I think this is going to be a book where they never find him and they never find out what happens to him. And it just gets more and more cryptic. Like, what the fuck was going on? Like, maybe like a crazy version of Unsolved Mysteries or something. And in some ways, it is kind of like that. And, talking about the whole family dynamic and going through grief, it was very interesting stuff to read. This book isn't like, this is another thing. I saw people like, it's not scary. I don't know what this obsession is with like being scared shitless all the time. By the way, Scared Shitless is the title of an upcoming short story of mine. So that's why that's in my brain. But, like, not that it's like you can only want to read shit that scares the hell out of you. That's fine. But I just don't need to be scared out of my wits all the time. And it seems like a lot of people these days, I read a lot of reviews, not just of this, but of a lot of work that people are like, it's like the only qualifier for it being good is that it made me shit my pants. And it's like, that's not always what I'm looking for. I don't always need like an intense dopamine rush when I read a book. Now, of course, I think we're all looking for that next 5-star read. Like, it's not like I don't want to read, 5-star amazing books. But when I read a book like this, where it's not very scary, it's not very anything in any direction, but it's all really good, that's fine with me. And some of the stuff is scary. Just if I found like the concept of putting a lens on a mom grieving over her son who she thinks is probably gonna, she knows he's probably dead. It's kind of terrifying. And I would imagine if you had, I don't have kids, but if you had kids, that would be even harder to read. It's not like it was like brutal. Like this book was not like, like really brutal, but it was still sad, and uncomfortable at times. Although this book does get a bit brutal to the end, and let's talk about that in a second. I'm getting ahead of myself, but in talking about this kind of family dynamic thing and also this ambiguity, I did start to get that sense of like, I don't think we're going to find out what's going to happen. And it's really interesting the way that it's presented. This mother is essentially, first she thinks she sees her son in her room huddled over, but his face is fucked up like he's dead or he's a zombie or something. And it scares the shit out of her. And then she's convinced she saw it. But then her mother and her daughter, well, her mother's like, you gotta be under control. You gotta be in control here. You can't be saying shit like that. You can't be freaking your daughter out. Like pull it in. And then her daughter kind of believes her, but then her daughter eventually admits, because they're finding this boy's diary pages magically scattered throughout the house as if like a ghost is leaving them. And then her daughter eventually says, I was leaving them because I felt like you wanted, like Tommy was here and it was helping. But then they find more diary pages and then weird shit starts happening. There's this whole plot point with this camera that they buy that's motion censored camera, and not a ton comes from it, but the way that he set it up, I thought that was really effective. It almost reminded me of like that Paranormal Activity movie where they use the Connect, that scene. Not as on the nose as that scene, again, talking about ambiguity, but I just thought that was an interesting scene. There were some very tense, creepy moments, like Jean dipping his toes into different little things. Like there were some moments in this book that I was like, is this about to become like a full-fledged supernatural horror novel? Because there were some creepy moments. And then it just dabbles in that. And then it goes back to family grief and an intense character look at this kind of stuff. And then it goes to crime. And then it goes to David Lynch-esque, weird, cryptic, small-town puzzle shit. It's very interesting in the way it never felt like it didn't know what it was trying to be. It felt like it was a perfect smorgasbord of all those things. However, this leads me to the things that I wasn't thrilled about. And I bring up that whole, the thing with the mother and the camera and the whole thing. Her mother in the book, Janice, tells her, she sends her an email, and it's basically like an article that says, sometimes when, and I don't know if this is a real condition or not. I wouldn't be surprised if it actually is a real thing, but how, sometimes in intense moments of stress or trauma, people tend to see figures that aren't there as a sort of like coping mechanism. Like it gives some historic examples, which I don't know if are true or not, if Paul came up with those, but about how, some people that were like in the Arctic or something, they saw like a fourth guy with them for morale, but he wasn't really there. That's stuff that probably could happen, just not like there was a ghost, but like, in intense trauma, our brains can manufacture some pretty crazy things. So that was interesting. But then as she reads it, it starts going into doppelgangers and talking about people seeing doppelgangers. And I was like, here we go. I love doppelgangers, my friends. I love them. I love it. Twin Peaks, doppelganger. I love that stuff. I love it. So I thought, I think this is about to get fucking nuts. And nothing more comes from it until we start getting towards the end of the book where we start piecing it together. And keep in mind, you're going to finish this book and you're not going to know what the fuck you just read. And that's okay. I mean, I read this and I kind of I have some ideas about it's not so ambiguous where you're like, I'm not sure what I'm reading. Like this book is a very easy read, I think, in some ways. Like his prose is very functional and easy to read. It's not like some literary novels where you quite literally have no idea what's happening because it's so dense and complicated. It's an easy read in that sense, but there's just so much going on that you're unsure of. So when I finished this book, I had an idea about what was going on, but I just couldn't figure it out. And I'm going to let this one sit. I don't want to actually think about it too much. I want it to sit and come back to it. And I don't think that the point is to understand everything, but it's fun though to try to piece things together. Um, but it starts to touch on the doppelganger aspect. Um, they kind of show the night where Tommy and his friends are out at Devil's Rock, or Split Rock, if you will. They like to call it Devil's Rock, and where Tommy takes off, and you kind of get to see the moment that the kids, his two friends, Josh and Luis, basically said he just took off, and they kind of retrace that night. But Tommy sees somebody in the woods and kind of says something cryptically strange, like, "Oh shit! Oh, it is! Oh fuck!" Like he starts freaking out, and then they see like Tommy run away, but then they see Tommy come out of the woods again, and they're just like, they're not sure because it's dark and they're scared out of their fucking minds. It's just weird, and I'm like, this is fucking awesome writing. Like, I love this shit. It is creepy and weird, and I don't know what the fuck is going on. And I always bring up David Lynch. I just can't stop talking about this David Lynch. I love him, but that felt like Twin Peaks kind of nonsense. I was like, what the fuck is going on? It was really good. It was just gripping and interesting. Here's my problem. I'm going on a long time. I'm sorry. The mother, when she starts reading about doppelgangers, it goes so in depth. It's like it felt like the author was like, I really need you to know what doppelgangers are. Like, I don't want to put a doppelganger in this book and not have you know what it is. And it felt like handholdy and very on the nose. And I actually saw a review that said, like, it was a negative review that said this book sucked. It was like young adult bullshit. Now, I don't think this is a young adult book by any means, but I have to admit to you, when I finished it and I thought back to that doppelganger scene where it was like so like on the nose foreshadowing what was going to happen, I think I out loud said, that's like some young adult bullshit. So that really annoyed me, and I felt like I had to take a whole point off the book because I was just like, this book is so ambiguous and up in the air, and you're going to do something like that? And then the doppelganger thing that happens, it's like you could miss that in the reading. You really could. If you're not paying attention to the reading, or if you don't think that way, which is fine. I don't mean that as disrespect. We all think differently, right? We read differently. You could miss that. You could not know what the fuck you just read, and you could not put that together. But the fact that it's so on the nose earlier on, I was like, what are you doing? That irked me big time. I actually, that bothered me big time. Okay. Another small nitpick, the children in this book. I actually thought that the kids were fairly realistic as they could be by being written by an adult. Like, I know this guy has kids, he said in the blurb or whatever, but it's hard for us adults to write like kids, but I think he did a pretty good job. It's weird at first, like they're calling each other bruh and stuff, and I'm like, what the fuck is this? But I guess that's maybe old man me over here. Like, I guess that's how the kids talk these days. But I kind of felt like, whenever I think of kids, I think of like either the 80s or the 50s, right? I think of like the Goonies and shit, or I think of like It, So it's that era of children. Almost blew everything. I almost blew this review. That era of children is very ingrained in my brain, so it's weird to read about kids that are modern. I mean, this book's like 6 years old, but fairly modern. But I think it was actually pretty well done. One complaint, though, and someone else, I read reviews of this afterwards. A lot of Minecraft talk in here, and it's like, I don't think it was that odd because you have to remember that these are like 12 and 13-year-old kids, so they're just starting to go through puberty, but they're also still very innocent. And kids like being obsessed with Minecraft is not out of the ordinary at all. It's not. So they talk a lot about Minecraft. You might find it like at times I was like, these are like, I call them hello fellow kids references, like I'm like, okay, we get it. I don't generally like modern references in stories because it pulls me out of everything. And so I think I could have done without the Minecraft references in this book. He could have just made something generic, made something up. I think I would have preferred if he made up his own video game, um, or if he just said they liked video games. But oddly, and I'm not entirely sure, but I feel like there is something about the game of Minecraft. There's something, a comparison to be drawn between some of the aspects of the game and what's going on in here. And I don't think I'm looking into it too much. I think he had something in here. I just couldn't figure out what it was. But there's almost one too many references. That's the best way I'll put it. It didn't bother me like it bothered some other people, but it's like, okay, I think you put it like one too many references in here. My only other complaint was that the end of this book completely like goes in a different direction. It starts becoming a true crime sort of thing, and I have to say that I did like the way it went. By the way, this book the last like quarter of the book gets very dark very quick. I actually was not expecting the book to go that route because of course it's not a happy book. It's about a child that disappeared and is very likely deceased, as you would expect, unfortunately, in these cases. But it just goes really far at the end, and I kind of appreciated it. I thought it was very well written, and it was honestly terrifying. Like I wasn't like unable to go to bed after reading it. Of course, you know, I think you all understand. Like we're kind of desensitized to horror, but it was scary. Like it was a realistic horror, and I was like, oh shit, that's very bad. What happened? But then I don't know if it's true. I don't know. This book also ends with Police Transcripts, which was an interesting way to kind of end the book out, but I kind of liked it. I thought it was unique, and I actually thought it worked. And again, just like I said earlier, these transcripts answered some questions, but for every question they answered, it brought up more questions, and I just really liked it. And the way that it ended there's almost like an epilogue of sorts at the end of the book, and it was fine. It was just an ending that I thought was serviceable, I guess you could say. I don't mean that as an insult. The ending was fine. It just wasn't like a holy fucking shit, this book just blew my mind ending. You know what I mean? But this book was fascinating to me. There were some issues, like I said, that true crime thing near the end, almost like telling you too much, but then it kind of, you were like, wait, well, did that really happen the way he said it did? I don't know. The whole thing worked for me. I can totally see why people do not like this guy, but this is actually what I'm looking for. This is the kind of writing that I am looking for. It's easy to digest. It's written to where you don't need to have a fucking PhD to read it. But there's a lot going on here that to think about, and it's just very creative in the way that he frames things. And he's not afraid to be realistic and show you raw emotion, but also just, bend the rules a little bit because it's a book. I like when authors aren't too serious with the rules of reality and just kind of bend things because they feel like it, and use very ambiguous framing devices, so to speak, to get you to think about things. I just really like it. And I mean, shit, I know people don't really think this is his best work, so I can't even imagine how good his other ones are. Yeah, really good. Yeah, this is the hardcover, by the way. I probably should have done this in the beginning, but since I'm starting to review physical books again, I always do like to show off the actual book. But this is 330 pages, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. 327 pages, so it's a pretty short book. I don't know what the paperback would be, maybe like 400. I'm one of those people that's kind of weird, so I like to read my books with the dust jacket off. And here's what the book looks like. I don't know if that's quite pretty. You can leave if you don't want to see this. I just like showing off the book for you folks that are a little more nitpicky about the way your books look and things, or you're curious before you buy it. I always like that myself when people show it off, so that's why I'm doing that. But here's that. I really like this blue and yellow color scheme. I'm not sure how that actually relates to the book, though. I did find that strange, this Dust Jacket, which is the cover is like the cover's fine. It's a totally serviceable cover. It looks very professional. It makes it look like a thriller or something. This would pop off the shelf at Barnes and Noble, but it's not like the best cover I've ever seen, right? But the dust jacket's great. You know those dust jackets that are glossy and thin and like fucking tissue paper. It's one of those nice, good ass matte finish ones. I know this is silly, but I like to see this myself, so I need to show this off. I did buy this book used, by the way, for $1.50. It's in like near perfect condition, which is honestly shocking to me that this book was so goddamn cheap. And it's like $27 brand new or something like that. So holy smokes. Now I just want to say that I do buy used books quite often. I prefer to buy my paperbacks new just because of the quality. I don't want it banged up and shit. But I don't mind if a book is a little banged up. Like if something has a little love put into it, I don't care. But if it's like a fucked up, dog-eared paperback, I don't want it. So that's why I generally buy my paperbacks new. But I don't want to like buy this for $1.50 and like not give this dude some cash. You know what I mean? I'm not saying like I want to give him some pity cash, but like I want to support this author. So I just wanted to say that I'm not telling you what to do. You do whatever the fuck you want. But what I like to do when I buy a used book like this, down the line, I'll probably buy the ebook of this, which might seem redundant to some folks, but I do want to support this author. And I just like having an ebook of like everything. It might seem insane to some, neurotic even, but then it's like, if I just ever feel like reading this book and I'm somewhere and I have my Kindle, boom, I just can read it, read it again. I will read this book again. It will be a couple years, but I will. So I know this is a little long, but I wasn't even thorough. My reviews, every time I make a review, and I'm sure this is the case with everybody, it goes on, especially my reviews, they're so fucking long. And then I watch it back and I'm like, I didn't talk about half the stuff I wanted to, but that's how it goes. Anyways, Disappearance at Devil's Rock by Paul Tremblay. I thought it was fantastic. It was a really, really excellent book, and I'm going to read. I will absolutely read all of his other books without question. As a matter of fact, there is I want to say it is Dark Regions Press who is putting out a limited edition of Cabin at the End of the Woods, I think. And I'd like to get a copy of that before it sells out. You know how fast those ones sell out. Like, what is it? What's the other big one? Not Dark Regions, and then there's Cemetery Dance. Cemetery Dance Publishing puts out some of the most gorgeous looking books ever. Stuff I salivate over, right? And it's like, and it's gone. You blink and it's gone. So good luck to all you folks if you ever want to buy any of these fucking books from those companies. So I sincerely mean that. That's not me being a smartass. It's hard to get these books, man. And then they're up on eBay and shit for like hundreds of dollars. It's tough, but anyways, this is like super long, but thank you for sticking through. If you did, I really appreciate it. If you read this book, let me know. If you didn't like it, that's fine. Let me know why you didn't like it. I don't care if you didn't like it. It's all good. It's always interesting to hear different viewpoints. If you liked it, let me know. And, I always do this. If you let me know what you're reading, what's on your read list. I said I had Night Film by Marisha Pessl and Ohio by Stephen Markley, but now they're like a week late. Like they're going to be a week late. I don't know. The shipping just decided to stall, so they're going to be awfully late now, and that's a bummer. But yeah, I have to figure out what my next read's going to be now. I don't know. All right, peace out, everybody. Thanks for sticking in with me for this long-ass review, and I appreciate your viewership and all your insightful comments. I really do appreciate it. And I hope you have a great day. Keep reading, keep watching movies, keeping yourself occupied, and having a good time. Peace out.